What up, though, people? It's your boy Brandon Dent, aka Detroit Kool-Aid. Welcome to the Woodward Pistons podcast. Jeff, Mr. Everything, Jeffrey Ayafredi, currently on the Morning Woodward Show. He will be coming on later to do some content. We're going to talk about Jalen Duren as well as his comments from the Morning Woodward Show. I'm sure if you're a fan of it, you've already heard his comments, and we got to get into it. It was discussing Dwane Casey, as well as his thoughts of the Pistons moving forward. But you guys see who we got on the screen here. So I got to get everything out the way, make sure this drum roll is right. Hey, yo, shout out to the legend, Detroit News, Rod Beard. Bro, how's it going this morning? It's a snowy morning, huh?
Yeah, it's a snowy morning, no school for the kids, so it'll be one of those days.
Hey, that works. That works. So actually, those days, when I was younger, that worked. As I've gotten older as a parent, I'm like, whoa, man, y'all are home?
No, and we went through it overnight. Last night it was canceled, and then it was a half day, and then this morning, just before 7, it was, all right, yeah, we're canceling this again because this ain't it. This is not it at all.
The teachers are like, all right, it's on the parents today. They're gonna learn today.
Yeah, y'all gotta make some y'all gotta make some plans or something.
Yeah,
we're not doing it.
I remember the first snow day as a parent, bro. And like the first one, it was like, hey, cool. Because it also so happened to coincide with the fact that I didn't have anything to do that day either. But then like the second and third one, I'm just like, all right, I love you, bro. I love you. I really do. But we gotta figure something out.
We gonna need to set you up where you can be independent. You need a workstation so you can go over there. You can do your thing, and I can do my thing over here.
Yeah. His teachers, it was funny because the teachers, we called. We were like, do you guys have anything to kind of keep them busy work wise? And they were like, your parents like number 15 that have called and said that.
Yeah,
so they wound up.
It's stuff like Khan Academy and things like that you can get them on. But it's like, yeah, you got to be a parent today, bro. This not just weekends. You don't have weekend visitation. You got to do it during the week too.
Yep. Bro, I see you got the coffee going. I love it. I love it. I love it. Hey, we got one of our big supporters, Adam. He's in the office next door. I saw him. He has his Birmingham roast on, and he's looking ready to go. And I'm ready to go. The question that I wanted to be able to pose to you just straight out the gate. Has this season been a failure? I'm seeing calls and cries from people all over. I'm seeing the internet divided. It's interesting. LCA, top 11, top 12 in attendance. I'm talking to fans out there. They have a completely different perspective than social media. But in your perspective, has this season been a failure?
For me, no. But I won't dismiss people who say that it is, because it depends on what your expectations coming in were. If you said you wanted this season to be a playoff or play-in year, which we kind of discussed and said it could be. That's the high end of this. If that was your thought coming in, then yes, it's a failure. But why is it a failure? Well, if Cade was completely healthy and everybody was completely healthy and the record was whatever it is, then yeah, you say this is a failure because you had all of the pieces there. Of course, we know that's not true. So if you were expecting Sadiq to take a huge step forward and be an all-star caliber player, yeah, this season's a failure. He's not that. If you wanted Killian to come in and take the job from Cade, there are people. If you said Killian's going to come in and take Cade's job and be a
you're not lying, bro.
15 and 10, if that was your thought in whatever world that you live on, in whatever part of the multiverse you're in, that you said Killian was going to be a 15 and 10 or 15 and 8 guy, yes, the season is a failure. But anybody who's looking at it realistically can't put failure as the word to say that's what this is. I'll say disappointment is a fair word to use. Disappointment because of the injuries, disappointment because you didn't get to develop guys. But at the end of the day, it's always a why. We always have to be analytical in what we do and say, why did that thing happen? Is it a failure that you think you didn't improve the roster? Well, you got Boyan. You improved the roster. You got Jalen Duren and you got Jaden Ivey. You improved the roster. If you say this roster didn't mesh and some of the pieces are starting to stick out like sore thumbs, that's a disappointment. That's not a failure. That's a disappointment that you haven't actually got to where you wanted to get in some places. So I look at words that way. Words are important. We obviously know. I can say disappointment is a fair word to use. Failure, no. You got two young rookies who probably will be in the Rising Stars game. Cade would have been in the Rising Stars game, if not the All-Star game. You can't look at this and say this is a failure. A failure is everybody's healthy. You got everything going for you, and you still end up with 13 or 14 wins. I think that's where you draw the line there.
Yep. Yeah, man, you put that so succinctly. And I think that you put it in a way that helps some fans that are on the fence or on the side of this season is a failure, at least be able to see that this season isn't a waste. So whether or not you believe all the season's a failure, well, you have to ask yourself, what did you want, like you stated, coming into the season? And I do believe that there's a place for even those play-in people, even those people who think this team should have been able to overcome the loss of Cade Cunningham. There has to be a place where these people can look and see, but there are some positives here as it relates to this overall rebuild. We wondered, we pondered, is this team in a position, remember in the summer, to take that Cleveland Cavaliers type jump? We all sat here and we said, you know what? Actually looking at it, no, they're not. And you continue to be a kind of reasoning, evening, balancing voice in this, even when we talked about how good is this team really with making a play. And we said, man, are they better than 5 teams? We were like, I don't know. We didn't know. This was the reality when we actually got into it. I will admit, coming in, each step of the way, there is some type of zealous hope. But when we actually get into doing the job of it, which means we can't find ourselves in an aspect of just saying it's a failure without parsing. If it's a failure, we will find out that it's a failure. And when we get into it, it's just like, okay, all right. We wanted this team to be able to find a way to kind of punch up this year. It didn't happen, and the injuries definitely derailed some things, but not a lot, like you stated. Who are the names you're hearing at the trade deadline? Talented names from the Pistons or from other teams? Because if you ask me, you just hear Boyan, you see Alec Burks, you see Sadiq Bey, and then you see teams going away and getting their like option B or C. Yeah. That means that there's talent here. This team has upgraded. But like we stated, the straw that stirs the drink, that's going to be Cade Cunningham. And people want to continue to talk about, well, they weren't winning with him. We've covered these numbers already. You want to go from post All-Star break, they were winning. And if you want to start this season as it relates to where their numbers are sort of slow, again, I do put some weight to the injuries. Now, as it relates to disappointment being a fair word, that's something that I stated. I remember back in November, I went on the Morning Woodward show, and the conversation was on Killian Hayes at the time before he kind of went on this burst. And I said, you know what? I think that the proper word is, like you said, I think to be disappointed is fair. But you have to look at what's going on here. If this was a situation where there was no talent, and I think Killian Hayes is a smaller microcosm of the bigger Detroit Pistons. If this was about talent, then we would have an issue. We got to sound the alarm. But since this was about for Killian up top, what's going on up top, and for the Pistons, it's going to be what's going on up top with Troy Weaver, with Dwane Casey, with what these guys continue to augment and make sure, okay, we got to make sure our team can be more impervious too if we lose a Cade Cunningham. We got to make sure now we get a wing player. We got to make sure we augment a bigger player. Well, when we look at this trajectory with Killian from the time in November when we talked about this to where he is right now, he figured things out based on the way and the plan that these guys said they had. And so when looking at this as a failure, there's a time where there's people who say, well, Killian's a failure. They're not saying that anymore.
Yep.
And he wasn't a waste. And that's what I'm trying to at least put or find some way to articulate. This season is not a waste. I think that there are a lot of disappointments. I wanted to see, and I've been disappointed about this from the beginning of the season. I really wanted to see the pick and roll game blossom.
Yep.
Now, we are getting a better look at, Jalen Duren, and we've seen Isaiah Stewart before he went out to injury, be able to actually get opportunities to play this and get better. I wanted to just kind of get your quick thoughts on anything I stated, as well as what positives, because I know sometimes it's easy to say, well, just the rookies, but Is there any one thing that you're like, you know what, this is going to pay huge dividends moving forward? This is why this season is not a waste.
Let me hit one thing first.
Yep.
That we can go back and check tape on this, and I'm guessing it's true. It's probably true. I think we said they could be a play-in or playoff team if certain things happen.
Mm-hmm.
If they stay healthy, if Jalen Duren turns out to be something special, if they get chemistry with these sets of guys, if guys like Killian come, we can check tape on it, but I know there were stipulations, and we were saying a lot of things have to happen for them to be a play-in or playoff team.
Correct.
That it's not just roll the balls out there. They're good. We see what it is. We didn't know what Boyan was at the beginning of the year and what they had gotten. Maybe he's a starter. Maybe he's a guy who can key them and do. This dude is your ISO guy. I mean, that's and with Cade out, he is unquestionably your best player, and your go-to guy in the sets that you're doing. We didn't know that Jalen Duren was going to be kind of this thing so quickly. We figured, but that's the trust Troy sort of thing, is that if he identifies that, and they were so happy to trade up and get what they got, that you knew something was there. So
ecstatic.
Yeah, but so here's the thing. If you're going to trust Troy on some things, you got to kind of trust him on everything. You can't say he knows talent, but he doesn't know coaches, so he should fire. So if we've been saying that Dwane Casey's locked in and there's no other direction to go there, then you have to trust Troy on that. If you trust him making draft picks and free agents and signings and everything else, trades, you've got to trust him completely. It's like, I trust my wife to do some stuff, but I don't trust her to do it. Well, okay, well, how's that going to work? So I think there were some stipulations in what we said at the beginning, but I think the positive is you have more faith in Troy Weaver to make draft picks, and you feel like every single one is going to hit. You look at Killian and you say, we kind of said, we'll give him a mulligan on Killian because Sadiq and Isaiah turned out to be so good.
Mm-hmm.
We can revisit that now and say Killian's averaging 9.8 and we'll call it 10 and 6. And that's kind of what we said at the beginning of the year. Is Killian's not a 15 and 10 guy. Killian's probably like a 10 and 6 type guy.
We said 10, 5 and 5 to 12, 5 and 12. Yep.
I couldn't remember the numbers that we said, but we said something like that.
Yep.
So
that was it.
This still validates that Troy Weaver knows what he's talking about. It's just what kind of numbers are you going to need, minutes are you going to need for Killian to get to those levels? You know that he can ID Boyan and say, we're making this trade. He still wins every trade. He still wins every draft pick. Trust him on those things, but also trust him on Dwane Casey. If he didn't think Casey was the guy, don't you think Casey would be gone? That's how Troy
and he's spoken
operates.
on that too. That's the one thing, is like, it's not like he's been silent. He's consistently stated that Casey, there's multiple ways that a coach is going to be, looked at and evaluated, but he's consistently stated though that until that roster is to where Troy believes it's supposed to be, he's not going to blame wins and losses on Dwane Casey. And that's one thing that I do believe is fair. If this team was win now, like if this was the beginning of Dwane Casey's era or tenure, then yes, the wins and losses would have to matter. But when you tear this team down to the studs the way they did, I mean, like, people look at what they did with Andre Drummond being shipped out of here. What if that's tearing it down to the studs, which is what everyone thought needed to happen for a rebuild? What Troy Weaver did was absolutely cratered the team and started over, and I think got us here faster at a point of where people can actually feel like it's a disappointment, faster. You look at the process. The process took some years, and they only came away with maybe one or two players that they're happy with. Maybe, and in that process, they were able to flip some of these other players, like Ben Simmons and others, to continue to augment their process rebuild. And it took a long time. Troy Weaver has gotten us here in a couple years to the point that people believe it's a disappointment if we're not at play-in already. And we all stated that this was a rebuild window of 5 years. That's why the contracts were what they were. You want to talk about checking the tapes? This was always about that the 2 years on Bojan, the 2 years on Marvin Bagley, and the fact that you said when they're ready to win, if Jalen Duren is not the starter and Marvin Bagley is getting those minutes within 2 years, that's going to be completely different to the point that the economy is Marvin Bagley. We want you here. It's not going to be at a more expensive price because of what Jalen Duren has done over these last couple years. That was these windows and things we were talking about. Who's K going to be in 2 years? Are you kidding me? That's what we were all talking about.
We've seen what he is in essentially how many games has he played 82 yet? I don't think Cade's played 82. 76.
He played 60 something last year, right?
76. And in 76 games, he's 17-8, 5-6, and 5-6. I'm pretty good on what he is as a player. So let me do this one too.
Yeah.
Are you an old school video game guy? Are you? Oh yeah. You play Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Come on now.
so this season is like one of those games where you dropped in your quarter and you're just playing around and you lost 2 lives on the first board. The first pattern, you're like, okay, yeah, you got 1 life left. And it's like, do you walk away from that game or do you just keep kind of playing and figuring some stuff out? You don't think it's going to be really hard for you to get the high score, but you're playing it out anyway to try to see, okay, maybe I can get on a good little run here and pick up something. I can do something. And that's what this season is like. The Cade injury and it is like losing those first 2 lives in Pac-Man. You're like, well, dog, I'm not getting a high score. I can't do anything with this. But then if you start figuring some things out, well, yeah, you finish 2 or 3 patterns. You're at the apple pattern. And you're like, oh, okay, well, yeah, this might turn into something. But that's fans that look at it as this season is a failure are the people who walk away from that game and just say, well, I'm going to just let it sit there. And then just because I gave up, I didn't get the high score. So this is pointless. And the high score is the play. I've been trying to think of some type of analogy for this, but it isn't. There isn't. But you can't say this season is a failure because unless you said, okay, I'm getting that high score and that's it. But people, the basketball isn't like that. And you're right. We said at the beginning of the year, tell me 5 teams that this Piston squad is better than. And we said maybe Orlando.
But you even said that maybe. We even stated like they're going to be a talented bunch. And that's when we went and did the whole split of, are the Pistons even a better team than Orlando? Which team had the better trajectory? And ultimately we stated we thought they might finish ahead of Orlando, but in the standings, I believe they might be just ahead of them right now. Overall, the trajectory, I do believe in what the Pistons are doing. Look, Paolo, heck of a player, man. But I don't know, man. We've seen the Pistons match up with them twice, once with Cade, once without Cade. And I really, really, really like, as it relates to these young teams when they battle, I like how the Pistons look. I like what Troy Weaver's putting together. They have some obvious holes, but they were always supposed to at this stage. And as it relates to perspective, which is what I think this episode is really about, that I think is the best way to look at it. This season was always about you're going to have some holes. And we just thought, though, that those holes were different holes that were going to get exposed or as needing to be filled or already having been filled. We thought it was the contracts of Sadiq Bey, Killian Hayes, Isaiah Stewart, and these players having to prove themselves. Now we realize, and we talked about another hole as it relates to Jeremy Grant. We said this is the season that they're going to figure out a whole lot, including, do they need a bruiser type of a big man as well? Just one that's 6'10", 6'11" type. These are some of the things we talked about. We were going to figure out this season so that when they get this free agency, when they get this another draft pick, this is the last free agency or the last summer or the last draft. In my opinion, I said this in the summer, this one coming up, this is the last one where the Pistons should be in this type of a position, unless things go catastrophically wrong and then everyone gets injured. That's about the only scenario going into next season that I can see them having a repeat of this season. I just can't see it. Just the way that the players fit, the talent that he's accrued, like you've talked about, and look, Bojan, how many of us believed he was going to be the ISO player that he was and the playmaker? Career high in points, career high in assists per game. You know what I mean? Like who saw that on the way?
Troy.
And then Alec Burks, who saw that on the way? We sat here and told people that the rumors were out and that we had heard from some other sources and that we were hearing from some people. And I talked to some New York Knicks scouts that we got a lot more in Alec Burks than people actually know. Just sit tight. He's still a baller. And that Kevin Knox still has a little bit to give off the bench as well. These guys are in some pretty bad situations. Like you said, Troy Weaver identified that talent. I always talk about who he is on the AAU circuit and with the younger talent, with the high schoolers, with the college kids and things, and what he's meant to that circuit over the years. And just a lot of different people that you look at the pictures of these kids when they were younger. It's like, Troy Weaver was on the scene. This is who he was. But now we realize, let's not slide him here. He's been in the NBA for a long time now. He came into Detroit, and I has consistently, like you said, not lost trades and identified. So for me, as it relates to the perspective of the season on if it's a failure, there are some huge disappointments. Definitely. I wanted Killian to be able to come in and just build on everything we saw in the summer, build on everything we saw, through the training camps, build on everything we saw during the preseason, but it just fell off a cliff as soon as it started.
Yeah. And let's say this too, is for people who want to say, a lot of these things are similar from one era to the next. Keep in mind that Stan Van Gundy was a different team president and coach than what you have now. Keep in mind that the Ed Stefanski era was different than what you have now. Troy Weaver is different than all of those cats. And the roster is different in each one of those cases too. That Stan really thought he was close with Reggie and Dre. He thought he was really close to doing something, and they go and get Tobias. They go and get Marcus Morris. So all of those are kind of tinkering things of we're close. We got to do something else to do it. Okay, now let's go get Blake. So that's not what Troy's doing right now. Troy is just like, you know what? We're going to assemble talent and just figure out, and then we'll just pick out the chaff and just separate the chaff from the good stuff, and we'll just keep moving. So your perspective,
like he said he was going to do,
like exactly what he said he was going to do, and he did it quickly. But it's also so the fact that Troy did it quickly, and if you believe in Troy, you believe in what he's doing. The fact that he looked at the roster that he inherited and said, "I got to tear this whole thing down completely," tells you where it was at the time. And what he saw as the direction that you had to go is we got to tear it down and we got to bring in talent, and it's going to be a long time before we get there. He kind of set that up for you. So to say this is a failure or to do it, there's a plan for this to go forward. Where is he on that restore and the rebuild? That's up to everybody else to figure out. But if you thought this was going to be a just turn everything around quickly, it's too many variables in that. You can't just guarantee and draw a straight line and say Sadiq is automatically just going to be that good that quickly. You hope he does, but if he doesn't, that doesn't mean he's a terrible player. It means it's the NBA and it's flipping hard to be to go on a trajectory like that and stay like that. Who does that? I mean, you got to be a unicorn to truly special one to do that. You got to be Luka. You got to be any of the Celtics young guys. I mean, or Cade to continue like that and to stay healthy. It's just not very often that you see that. So, I mean, the failure stuff starts to get to me because it's people who have unrealistic expectations of what this was supposed to be. Yeah. That you didn't go out in free agency and get Paul George or Kawhi or something, and this was hey, just add water and let's go. It's not a Kool-Aid type thing. It is a pun intended, but it is very much you got to build this thing slowly to sustain it and not have this be a one-year wonder. You make the play in and then you just sitting with a roster that you can't do anything.
Oh, you talking about like the Stan Van Gundy? Oh, we made the playoffs. We got swept. It was a good sweep though. No, it's not. And then Dwane Casey's first year. I'm good on that. Give me the longevity that we experienced during the 2004 years. I'm going to close on this with this fan experience because it kind of brings us into this into the topic. I had this interesting experience with a fan, and I know you tell me, hey man, choose those battles wisely. And this one, I was like, you know what? I think this one is a wise one. And we got into it. He thought that we were discussing Killian from a negative standpoint. And I said, you're not familiar with our content. And it was interesting. And we got into it. And ultimately, he was like, we have to be patient with this team. I came into this year with these expectations too. Ultimately, he followed. I'm sure he subscribed because this is what we've been kind of promulgating with the factual basis and the quotes from people like Troy Weaver who said, this is a restore. I'm not letting anyone speed me up or slow me down. We're going to just make the right moves at the right times when they present themselves. We got our eyes on everything at all times. That's what he stated. And he said, Casey is doing what I've asked him to do, and he's doing it at the proficiency that we've asked him to do it at. But we talked about something interesting. The 2004 Detroit Pistons came up in this, and I said, everyone wants instant gratification, despite the fact that the 2004 Pistons team was full of late bloomers, except Tayshaun, who they just drafted, and he had a whole team full of vets around him, and Rasheed Wallace, who was already established. They just didn't go through their growth and development stages in Detroit, but before they got here, a la Chauncey Billups. We know his story, the 6 years of kind of bouncing around to a few teams, of not knowing exactly who he is. Is he a point guard? Is he a shooting guard? He's too short to play shooting guard? Does he have the playmaking ability to play point guard and whatnot? Well, the Pistons are really, really glad that he got the time to develop. And we are zoomed into this squad where they're at that Chauncey Billups stage before the Pistons. We get to see all their warts, as I call it, their wart stage. And he went on further saying, yeah, it's wild. And shout out ZM, it's at ZM Baker 94. He said it's wild seeing the reaction simply due to how people talk about what happened with Middleton, Khris Middleton, and Spencer Dinwiddie. People constantly complain the Pistons screwed up with them, but then have meltdowns about the 5 21-year-olds that are playing every night. I just wanted your thoughts on that. I got about 5 or 6 minutes, but I wanted to bring this because I didn't tell you the names beforehand. I told you you'd probably be able to guess, but he's right. How can we complain on one hand about giving up on these players? And then we also talk about we need to give up on the players we have right now. We talk about we trust Troy, but then we don't like his decisions.
Yeah, you're just going to have to let it marinate. You got to let it marinate and be ready. It's like when you get on your charcoal grill and you keep lifting up the lid to see if something's done. It ain't done yet. Okay, put it back down. And you go back 2 minutes later, lift it up again. It's 2 minutes since the last time. It's not done yet. So, and that kind of dovetails into the idea I had about eras and what people thought of potential back then is completely different. Khris Middleton is like, okay, that's not a big deal because we're trying to get something better. And you don't want to give up on guys. So people who are saying trade Sadiq right now, you want to trade that dude right now? Because he has the work ethic. He has the skill set to do a lot of good things. You just got to ride it out. These are typically the same people that get in a relationship and break up as soon as you have the first argument or you disagree about something. Hey, it's not perfect. Boom, I'm out. I can't roll.
You're talking about those people who leave a 1-star review like, the food was tasty, but there was no ice in my water. 1 star.
Everything has to be right. And you're not, you can't live life that way and be happy with anything because everything has a problem. There's a problem. Well, Killian this is okay, but he still fouls too much. Well, I mean, okay. Cade fouls too much too. So what are we doing? You have to accept some people with what their talents and their skill sets are, and then just say, I'll take these things if they give me, I'll take these bad things that I don't like if I get these good things that I do like. And so people just have to kind of weigh those things and be okay with some stuff. You're not going to find the perfect woman because if she's perfect, she's not going to like your dusty butt. So So people want this perfect team. Well, if you get this perfect team It's like Golden State. Are people still riding with Golden State right now, even though they're struggling a little bit? Yeah, because they've been good for so long. You can't take the championships they've won, and then when they start playing bad, you say that's not my team anymore. That's not how. I mean, people can do what they want to do. I'll say it that way. Y'all can do what y'all want to do, but be realistic about stuff. Because I'm off my soapbox. I'm off the soapbox,
bro. That's the word. That's the word there, man. Like seriously, that's the word. Like I said, it's all interesting because nobody. I think that we're getting so far away from the 2004 Pistons that it's easy sometimes for fans to try and use them in a certain light that when you actually zoom in, it's like it wasn't really like that. It took some time. The Pistons had to do a lot and it sacrificed some stuff and they eventually got it right. And that's the lesson in it. Even the players that we had to all go through their journeys. But ultimately, what made the 2004 Pistons the 2004 Pistons, man, one of the greatest things to me was how they all covered up each other's warts. It wasn't about if Ben Wallace was an offensive player. It wasn't about if Ben Wallace was going to shoot a certain free throw percentage or not. People knew Hacker Ben existed. Did that matter in 2004 or 2005? Not at all. Not at all. People didn't know about Chauncey Billups and his point guard skills or this or any other. Richard Hamilton got traded as a young player from the Wizards. I'm sure they regret that. And they had some questions about who he was going to be. All he does is run around. All he does is shoot from the mid-range. He can't shoot the three. These were some of the things that people were saying about these guys. They found a way as a team to all come together, including Rasheed Wallace. How much did they protect Rasheed Wallace when he got here? To the point that even his whole entire image in terms of how people viewed him changed, man. They all helped cover each other's warts.
Huh? You know how hard that is to do, to change somebody's perception in a year or two? That's insanely hard. So, and let's go back to even the Bad Boys. In that first iteration with Adrian Dantley, that they tinkered with that. They were a really good team, but that just wasn't it. So they had to make some other moves to try to get over that hump. That's a good team. You lose to Boston, you lose to LA, you just can't get there. Yep. But you have to keep tinkering with it. You can say this team has warts. They can't do this. They can't do that. They can rebound and then they can defend and they can do some other stuff, but they're not perfect. And it took some time for them to come together and to really start figuring stuff out. So, I mean, I think that's the way people have to view stuff, is to say, it's not going to be pretty all the time. It's not going to be perfect all the time. But sometimes, and when you look at the going to work, that's kind of catching lightning in a bottle too, because you don't really have a star that you can go to when you're coming down the court and you need a bucket. Who are you going to? Any of them dudes, essentially, because it didn't matter. You had to develop that sort of killer instinct sort of thing that they did. So, I mean, people are people. People are going to think what they want to think and say that this team is flawed, and it is flawed. Defensively, they do not have the pieces that they need, and they're not going to be where they eventually will be. So there are flaws here, but there's a lot of talent and there's a lot of potential that goes with that too.
I like that. Well, look, they're calling me over. I'm about to go in here and try and espouse this on the Morning Woodward show. I appreciate you being on here, Rod. And this was heat. Like, I can't wait for the people to hear this one. I can't.
Hey, if you get to talk to Jeff's, if you get to walk past Jeff's handlers, because you're not going to see Jeff, you're going to see Jeff's handlers and his entourage, his security detail. If you happen to see any of them, tell them I said what up.
I got you. And we're going to make sure I clip that and I send it to you too. It's going to be funny, man. All right, guys. My name is Brandon Dent, a.k.a. Detroit Kool-Aid. Hey, I'm about to go and see Jeff. I am Freddie, Mr. Everything.
Maybe.
The legend. We're going to get this drum roll going. Hey, yo, shout out to the legend, Detroit News Rod Beard, brother. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you.
All right, bro. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Peace.
Peace.